Next up, we have Pradeep Behl, Director at Cognizant, talking about techniques to measure and boost the effectiveness and impact of DevOps. Take it away.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Pradeep Behl. I'm a solution architect with Cognizant, and I'll be talking to you today about measuring DevOps impact. First of all, the typical scenario, which happens frequently. We run into customers who have implemented a full-fledged DevOps pipeline, and everything is working well and they're seeing benefits out of it. However, they're never able to get to the level of DevOps like organizations like Google or Microsoft or Amazon, who you might have heard has got a really fast and robust DevOps pipelines. The other aspect we run into is that how to measure the effectiveness of your DevOps pipeline, how well it's performing, and how we can go about improving those DevOps processes. So we'll be talking about all three issues up here, and I'll be taking through a sort of a stepwise methodology on how to approach this measurement dilemma. The way to think about it, perhaps, at a high level, is think of a Fitbit watch. When you have a Fitbit watch, there are a couple of things which are happening. First of all, the watch is giving you some indications of things like your level of activity, your pulse rate, your oxygen level. Think of those as sort of the measurements which are coming out. And then based on those, you might do a set of actions. You might exercise more, you might sleep more, and so on and so forth. So think of those as things which are going to enhance those health metrics. And then you turn towards the Fitbit app, which is going to help you track all of that. It's going to baseline what it's seeing day to day, week to week, and give you an idea of how it's all improving. We are going to apply a similar model towards DevOps. We are going to talk first about how to measure DevOps processes, then go about talking about how we can enhance their performance, and finally, how to monitor and track the improvements. When you think about DevOps measurements, there are a couple of ways in the industry you approach that. One of the typical approaches is looking at it from the maturity perspective, and the typical methodology towards that is called CMMI. And based on a set of questions, you can assign certain criteria, like this is a defined process, this is a repeatable process, or this is an optimizing process. Another way to look at it is to focus on certain capabilities. So you'll be looking, for example, there's a container registry, or a code quality tracking tool like SonarQube, or static code analysis integrated within DevOps. So those would form the basis of your assessment. What we have found in the industry in practice is that these two measurements techniques tend to be subjective, because they really depend on how the evaluator is considering the different criteria. So DORA, which is the DevOps Research and Assessment Organization, it's an industry body, did some research into the characteristics of high-performing DevOps organizations, and came up with a set of empirical measurements that I would go through, which are quite objective and are based on certain observations about some measurements in a DevOps processes. And they appear to be a more robust way to go about measuring your DevOps effectiveness. Again, look towards the right, the DORA report. Some of the things I'm putting out here are from that report. So the 4 things we want to be focusing on. One is the deployment frequency, which is how often you're going to deploy, particularly how you're going to deploy into production. Clearly, more often you deploy, the better the health of a DevOps is. The second measurement is lead time for change. What lead time for change means is the time that you start to formulate requirements to the time that you actually take that story that you have built and you have pushed that into deployment, into production. Clearly faster and more that you can shrink down the lead time for change, better your DevOps pipeline is. And the third criteria is time to restore service, which is what happens if there's an outage in your infrastructure. How quickly can you restore back service? And clearly, the faster you can restore back service, the better your infrastructure and DevOps processes are. And the fourth one, finally, is the change failure rate, which refers to when you deploy into production, how many of your deployments are going to be successful and what percentage are going to be unsuccessful. So clearly, you have a vested interest in making sure that less and less deployments are unsuccessful. So towards the right, there is something very interesting. This is again based on the statistical analysis done by DORA, and it classifies organizations into elite and into high, medium, and low. If you look across those, particularly the top two rows, you would see a great amount of change once you move from low into elites. So low, for example, is doing what one would assume is a monolith release, and that's taking place once every month, once every 6 months. On the other hand, elite is an Amazon or a Google-like organization, which is doing multiple deployments per day. And between them, you see high and medium designations. And a lot of the organizations we work with fall, I believe, somewhere between high and medium. And something very interesting as well, if you look for lead time for change, an elite can formulate and push in response to a requirement, a software deployment in less than a day. However, a low-performing organization can take up to a month, and it takes several months to do so. Going down the next two lines, there is change, but there is less change. So high and medium are pretty close to each other, but the elites are a bit faster. And you see, when it comes to change failure rate, there are similarities, but there's a difference between low. So a key takeaway here is that there's a great deal of gap between organizations which perform really well and the low performance. And the high performers, the elite organizations seem to do well in all categories. So with that, we'll try to drill down a bit more into this slide on what this means. So when you think about improving and accelerating your deployment frequency, it's going to positively impact your digital responsiveness, because faster you deploy, quicker you can respond to the needs in the digital marketplace. Lead time for change, the more you can shrink down the lead time, more it's going to increase what's referred to here as a digital velocity. And digital velocity is accelerating innovation. Therefore, you spot a requirement, you respond to it, and you can respond very quickly to it if your lead time for change is small. Time to restore service is refers to digital resilience. So it's a capability to be able to maintain the digital experience to the organization without suffering outages and disruptions. And change failure rate refers to digital consistency. And what that means is when you deploy a capability through a DevOps pipeline, it would stick and you would not have to roll it back. The four things listed on the impact column: responsiveness, velocity, resilience, and consistency. If you think about where we are in our digital economy, all of them relate to how well this is going to map to the market performance and is going to impact the customer satisfaction, therefore the market share and financial performance of the company. So how to go about improving all of these aspects? What I've listed here are some of the techniques from our practices, which are also derived from DORA, but there could be many others that one can think about. One of the first ones is to look hard at your DevOps pipeline and make sure that everything is automated. Now, this would sound to be somewhat superficial because everyone thinks that the DevOps pipeline is automated. But in our experiences, when you start to look closely at the DevOps processes, you run into what's referred to as a last mile syndrome, that there are things which are still done manually because it was convenient to do so, and they're just kept that way. So some examples of that could be on the deployment side. Some examples could be how software is being configured and other aspects. So you want to carefully look towards those pockets of manual operations and make sure that everything is automated, because this is going to impact two matrices. It's going to impact the deployment velocity. You're going to deploy faster because everything is automated. And it's also going to impact the level of digital consistency that you have to make sure that everything you do is repeatable. The second thing to look for is to avoid the large release syndrome and to do things in small batches. Clearly, when you do things in small batches, you can deploy them faster and you can manage them individually better. And associated with that is what's referred to as trunk-based development. Now, when we develop new features, we open new feature branches. And the concept of trunk-based development is to keep the lifespan of the feature branch to be as small as possible, preferably not more than 2 days, which has the benefits of both putting things in small batches and avoiding a lot of skew away from the trunk. And then there's a whole set of things which come under continuous delivery. So having continuous integration, continuous deployment, loosely coupled architectures, microservice architectures, think about shift left security, and importantly, observability. So you can spot things like QA failures and deployment failures and respond to them quickly. Other things to look for is introducing a monitoring dashboard. Now, a lot of the products in the market do come with the monitoring dashboard. So take, for example, a Jenkins Blue Ocean dashboard, which is excellent. But what you're looking for in a dashboard, as we would examine a bit later, is the ability to correlate historical data and to be able to gather data from multiple sources, and also to provide you with an end-to-end view. And rapid customer feedback, the ability to be able to deploy your software releases and gather feedback quickly and to be able to respond to that. So you don't really want to wait for the software to be deployed into production and then to talk to your product management team. If you can instead have canary releases, which are releases to a group of users, or you can have A/B releases where you have two paradigms, you're comparing with each other, and look for feedback points like how much the users are using your release, what percentage of the users are completing the operations, how much time they're taking towards doing that. Put there a like button there, put some survey capabilities. Those are means to gather information quickly, and then to feedback to the development team so they can respond to that and the experimentation can carry on. Infrastructure resilience and visibility. Obviously, like most of us, if we are on the cloud, we have a high availability architecture, and many of us are thinking about geographically apart regions for DR testing. Where we see gaps is having a regular schedule of doing failure and DR testing. It's great to have high availability architectures, but if you don't exercise them frequently, the chances are that there'll be things which will slip through the cracks. Being able to do instant notification and to be able to recover automatically without manual intervention. And probably the most important is this, is having a supportive culture in the organization, the ability to encourage innovation, the capability to take risks, and have decisions flow from bottoms up. So how we go about measuring these 4 pieces of evidence, deployment frequency. So that would be the number of deployments to the production environments, which are being averaged across days, weeks, and months. Lead time for changes, again, the median time from the time you formulate a story to the time you deploy it. Time to restore service, which is the median time it will take to restore and from an unexpected failure. And change failure rate, which is the percentage of failed deployments averaged across certain time periods. And in the next slide, we would look at some means to be able to collect all of those. A great way to collect all this information is using what's referred to as smart dashboards. Smart dashboards have a couple of characteristics. First is that they collect historical information and they're able to baseline it. Second is that they're able to correlate information from multiple sources. So you're not just looking at a DevOps pipeline, you're looking at your agile tools where stories are being formulated. You're looking at a source repository, you're looking at your ticket management systems, which happen to be a great way of gathering the information that we talked about. And of course, look at the infrastructure monitoring. And they have visualizations to do slicing and incorporation of all this information, and the capability to drill down, do alerts, and so forth. Now, there are a couple of tools in the industry you could look at. One of them comes out of New Relic, and you would see this presentation in link to help you learn a bit more on how they handle this. Their concept is to track all of these sources and to generate events out of that and to be able to correlate those events. Hygia, which is an open source tool, which is an open source dashboard, comes with many collectors for different data sources and gives you the ability to do slicing and dicing. And we at Cognizant also offer Cognizant One DevOps Insights, which is also an open source tool, and actually has a graph database and some interesting technologies which let you correlate from end to end the time a story is completed to the time the deployment takes place and to all the things in between. So things you could potentially look at. So with that, our Fitbit virtual cycle is now complete. We talked about how to measure DevOps evidence. We talked about some techniques, how to enhance it. And then we touched on the monitoring aspects. So turning to some real life scenarios and how all of this is developed, I have two scenarios here. A scenario that we run into quite frequently is a need to accelerate deployments. And that's a great use case because when you're accelerating deployments, there's a whole range of things that you need to touch in your DevOps pipeline. They would range from clearly improving the level of the automation, but also to things like improving the quality of your stories so that your stories are sufficiently granular. And also looking at how to track the deployments. More deployments you have, more would be by yourself introducing a dashboard to be able to track those. And one interesting thing when you're in a high deployment environment is the concept of a deployment error budget. So what that means is that if you're doing deployments frequently and all of them start to fail in sequence, or there are many deployments which fail in a certain time period, there could be something potentially wrong, some intrinsic software framework or some defect in the infrastructure somewhere. And once you exceed a deployment error budget, deployments would slow down automatically. So again, this is related to the concept of being able to maintain the level of digital resilience and not disrupting it by doing continuous deployments when there's a potential problem in doing so. So this is again a great use case, touches a lot of things, happens quite frequently. Another use case is particularly when it comes to building new user interfaces, there's a need to make sure that the user interface is going to stick when you deliver it to the marketplace and the users are really going to like it. So what we want to do, and we have done in the past, is to look carefully and to make sure that the stories are well structured, both from their level of independence from each other, their level of granularity, and how clear they are as to what they're touching. Focus on canary and A/B releases and the measurement techniques that we talked about before to be able to get early user feedback and push continuously small changes rather than large changes to the software which is being deployed, and gradually come to a point where we are confident that the user really likes and can use those capabilities. And then it would be the time finally to push them into the production. And the outcome is that we have stories that stick, user interface that really works into the production. So that's all I had up here. I think I am pretty much 2 minutes to the time here. And at this point, I'm going to stop presenting and we can talk more once we get to the Q&A session.
Thank you, Pradeep. And as Pradeep just mentioned, there's a Q&A. If you go in Slack to the channel that's specific to this talk, go over there right now and you can ask questions to Pradeep, and other people are going to be there as well. Thank you.